episode of the rkdz podcast. My name is Rick. Hope everybody's doing pretty good. Let's see, today is May 31st. Here we are, almost at the middle point of the year here. I've got a good friend on with me today, connected via the internet. What's up, Sean? How you doing, man?
Doing very well, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Thank you so much. Met Sean a couple years ago now, I think, at work, doing about the nerdiest stuff you can imagine. But it's cool stuff. It's cool if you can appreciate that kind of stuff. Not necessarily something that I saw myself doing as a little child, but here we are, right? You know, life has its way of dictating where you go, right?
Absolutely, man. And, you know, puts us on a path where we intersect. So that's always a plus.
It's true. All right. So let's see. That would put us back to, I would say at least a year and a half is what I'm thinking. I'm just remembering like really late night and it was raining at the end of it. It's just a long ass day. But that was like the first time Sean and I had a meaningful conversation. It was like day one, and here we are. Like we're like going off the deep end while we're at work talking about all kinds of stuff. It was probably the first time that I'd like come in contact with another person outside of my inner circle who sounded like I sounded in terms of the stuff that I would talk about, you know, like we'll probably eventually get there, but it's just interesting, like the Venn diagram of things that we have in common, even though there are obviously, you know, differences personality wise and stuff. What's up, Kat? Do you remember that day, Sean? Like,
yeah, for sure. I can probably take most of the blame for the length of the day. You know, and when I get started, I kind of, you know, go from 0 to 100. So it was refreshing to also find some overlap in our kind of thought processes and stuff, and we just kind of ran with it. It was, I think, since then, you know, you're up there with some of the closer friends that I could consider. So it's definitely been a, you know, great experience.
Yeah, definitely, man. So why don't we? So I think we'll if you don't mind, I'll start off with this because I think this was one of the more fascinating things that I didn't really know about until I started talking to you. So, talk to me about the pineal gland, right? Like
Sure.
I remember you were telling me like about the calcification of that particular. Go ahead. I'll just let you take the floor because this is
Indeed
super interesting.
It's, if anybody familiar with your channel and has seen your rainbow synchronicity is what I describe that as, and you know, some of the greats like Carl Jung, contemporary of Sigmund Freud, German psychologist, you know, had a great definition of these things. And basically, you know, I was raised, you know, I'll kind of take it back a little bit. I was raised Catholic, you know, by my immigrant Irish mother and my altar boy father, you know, and I kind of, I guess, got the worst of organized religion in kind of that flavor of Christianity. And it kept me, you know, gave me good footing. And I always kind of, you know, like to think that I lived an ethical, moral life, but left a lot of unanswered questions. And, you know, always kind of challenged the narrative of, you know, what we're told and you know, the official story. So but I was rooted in mathematics and logic and reason and science. And I kind of, you know, felt that I had a grasp of how the universe worked and the place that, you know, our place in it. Yeah. But I started having the most incredible coincidences, and they really forced me to take a look at what's really going on. And there's got to be some sort of intelligent design. You know, I always consider myself an agnostic after kind of breaking away from, you know, the sacrament process of confirmation and all that stuff. So, you know, really just had me go down the deep end trying to figure out what this was and get an explanation for it. Fascinated with understanding and the desire to, you know, really know the cause of things, and started, doing some research about the pineal gland and it's a tiny gland in the center of the human brain. It's basically, in ancient cultures, the seat of the soul, or, you know, the origin of human consciousness. And you know, working in the industry that we work in, there's you know, kind of a medical establishment, you know, kind of system, and the way things
Sure.
we're told the way things work, you know. So it was interesting. Some of the technology that we work on can actually reveal possible brain tumors based off of the position of the pineal gland, and the generally what it is the calcification of the pineal gland shows up on an X-ray, and the medical professionals expect it to be in the center of the human brain, but when it's off-centered, you know, it could be the cause of something more serious going on. So kind of talking about, you know, the way we end up in the careers that we're in, you know, knowing what I knew about that and the technology, like I said, that we were installing and servicing, and how that was actually used as a way to kind of image the pineal gland. Just one more door to unlock, and you know, kind of take me down the pathway there, and figuring out what it's all about. So yeah, it's our diet toxifies it, and it's the fluoride in the water that you know, the municipalities are conditioning for, you know, supposed good the dental health for young children. And
absolutely.
You know, the toxins in the food and the genetically modified organisms. It's just the pineal gland is basically a magnet for the heavy metals, and you know, I believe that when it's calcified as it is in Western culture, it can almost sever the connection to the spirit and keeps us in this kind of zombified state. So through my, you know, understanding of it, I decided to take action, and in 2015 I went vegan. I was the biggest meat eater you could have ever met, you know, double cheeseburger guy, you know, you name it. And you know, it's the third eye in the Eastern cultures, you know, and in the Bible, Jesus says that if thine eye be one, the body be filled with light. But if thine eye be, you know, dual, I mean, you can probably quote the scripture better than I can, but there's biblical significance for it, you know, if you look deeper. And yeah, I mean,
there's so much there, man. There's just like, I mean, just thinking about like our very Western diet, you know, and all of the kind of standard crap that you know, the standard American diet, you know, I mean, obviously people have different, you know, kind of preferences to what they eat, but generally speaking, like a lot of the stuff that we eat, a lot of the stuff that's offered to us is just very like produced and very packaged and very like, you know, quick and snappy and like instant, you know, like no real nutritional value, but it's just like, here, put this thing in your mouth and fill your stomach with stuff, you know, so you feel full. But just to think that, you know, a lot of the stuff that we take in can affect like the way that our mind kind of thinks, or the way that our mind perceives the world to a certain degree. You know, because it's so interesting to me. Like there's just so much there, like in terms of like, you know, for instance, the feeling of like being lethargic, like, well, here I am, I stuff my face, I'm a giant fat ass, and now I want to go sit on the couch and watch TV because I'm so full, I don't want to move. You know, I mean, it kind of changes things a little bit, you know, and so I think that's what kind of led me down. Like I started poking at like Joe Rogan has a lot of really good content on that subject matter, just kind of like going down that rabbit hole. In fact, I think one of like his podcast logo has got like a little third eye.
Sure.
You know, so obviously there's something there, you know, and I think like in the context of like, you know, your background versus my background, like, you know, a lot of times like, you know, I would say that having conversations outside the scope of like, you know, what one's interpretation of like the Bible might be, like might come across to some folks as like, hey man, like, you know, maybe don't go knocking on those doors, you know, like you never know what you'll find. But like for me, it's like but I just want to know about this. Like this is fascinating. Like what, like, because there's like whole, you know, swaths of cultures that I don't know anything about, and the way that they see life, and the way that they, like, you know, like the, you know, your gurus, for, I hate to stereotype, but I'm just kind of like trying to like identify a certain person, like their diet is drastically different than what we might eat over here, our, again, American diet. But I don't know, man, I just think that stuff is absolutely fascinating, you know, like just
unfortunately in our culture, you know, it's a lot of living to eat instead of eating to live. You know,
Yeah.
so many people are obsessed with flavor and things that aren't necessarily good for us. You know.
Yeah.
And Hippocrates, which was the Greek philosopher of medicine, one of the first doctors, he said, "Let thy food be thy medicine." You know, and it was an oath that doctors had to take up until recently. And our current system is just about treating the symptoms. You know, it's about there's nothing getting down to the cause of what's at the root of these problems. You know, and it extends into all aspects of our culture. You know, and as far as what you mentioned about the interpretations of different regional texts that are considered almost sacred, there's an exoteric kind of meaning that's given out to the masses in all these different writings and traditions. And then there's the esoteric, which is generally reserved for the initiated, those at the top of the structure that, are on the inside of the club kind of. And, it's something that through the understanding of the pineal gland and with my, I guess, interest in ancient civilizations and how they depict it and how it's used as the box braids in Buddha's head with those little kind of squares that they have. It's almost like the layers of the pine cone. The Vatican, there's a quarter of the pine cone in the Vatican which has got Egyptian hieroglyphs on it, and it's flanked by Bennu birds, which are the Egyptian phoenix bird of death and rebirth. And the Pope has a scepter, kind of a staff that he uses, and there's a cross on the top of it with Jesus on there, but below the cross is the pine cone at the base of the cross. So you start to see it in Michelangelo's paintings and the Sistine Chapel. The Adam and God touching fingers is actually a cross section of the human brain. They lived in a time where to speak about such things as an initiate would have been certain death, so they had to encode it in the art, just like the writers of the Bible encoded it in the Bible, in more anthropomorphic terms, so when you start to uncover the symbolism and the iconography and stuff like that of the pineal gland and how it's been revered through ancient time, you start to wonder what else is in plain sight that's being concealed from us. And
my gosh, it's disgusting, man. It's disgusting. Like that whole, it's just one of those things that I like. A part of me wants to obsessively continue down the rabbit hole, right? Like, tinfoil hat guy, like, because there's so much information out there, especially now. Like, we live in such a connected world that, like, anything you want to look up, anything you want to research, man, it's just at your fingertips, and you could just continue to feast on all of the information out there. And so, like, the more you start poking around in certain places, the more you discover, the more curious you become. Like, I stumbled across this guy. His name is Marty Leeds. He's a numbers guy. Gosh,
of course,
like Gematria and all that stuff.
Kabbalah, he's great.
Like, I mean, the stuff that he was saying was just like blowing my mind.
I actually do a lot of different stuff. I focus on a lot of different subjects and things like that, mainly esoteric subjects, but viewed through the lens of mathematics. So a big focus is on Gematria, which is the art of assigning numbers to letters, and I focus on the English alphabet in particular. But basically, that's what I do. I look at esoteric subjects, mainly like Gematria, numerology, symbolism, and see basically all the connections that you can make with these subjects, and kind of look into them and see and show that a lot of these subjects have been sort of like dismissed in modern academia, and kind of show that these are legitimate subjects to study and how to study them in some respects. So
basically, Marty Leeds, really, really smart dude, just absolute master at numbers and mathematics. And, his explanation, like, he's like, I believe in God, but like for a long time he wasn't. And so, like, his research kind of pointed him to intelligent design. It's like, all of these numbers make way too much sense in the context of there's no way that it can't add or point to, a central intelligence, so to speak.
I agree completely.
There's a lot of information out there that's like just below the surface. You got to really look for it, but it's all right there. And if you you kind of like connect the dots, so to speak. You can find what you're looking for lack of a better phrase, like it's there, man.
Absolutely. Consciousness is just another term for awareness, and awareness is another term for pattern recognition. And when you start to recognize patterns, then you become enlightened. It's that simple. There was a Buddha, there wasn't just the one Buddha, Siddhartha Buddha, but there were other people in that culture that achieved the status of Buddha. And there was one of them who said that enlightenment is not transcending into a spirit body into another realm. It's just living in the physical, having pure love and understanding of how it all operates. With my desire to understand, it's about going back, and going back beyond the New Testament, back to the Old Testament, and the Old Testament is predated by the Talmud, which is a Hebrew text, and then Kabbalah is what that stems from, and it's all letter and number, and basically, if you're familiar with sacred geometry, this is the mathematics of fractals and ratios that are described in Genesis. When God created the earth in 7 days, or in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested, it's almost the same way in which you draw the first figure of the flower of life. There's the seed of life, the fruit of life, the flower of life, and these things just are repeating a series of circles, and the way that they move is very similar to the way that Genesis describes the creation of the universe. So it's just in man's desire to understand, and in a way to kind of make it tangible for the masses, they've anthropomorphized it. They've put a personage on there in terms of appearances and stuff like that. But I think we need to move away from belief, because it's belief that's got Muslims beheading infidels. It's belief that's got Zionists and stuff like that ripping people off at every turn. It's belief that's got pro-life Christians shooting up abortion clinics,
right. In the name of something good, right? Yeah.
We can move towards a knowing, and through study, through diligence, through effort, we can have an understanding of these things, and kind of see beyond the exterior surface message that's kind of etched in the record books.
Again, born and raised in church, right? My dad was a pastor. I was born into a family that was just getting to know like the Christian faith, right? And so like that's been coloring my worldviews for a very long time. And so as I got older, eventually you get to the place where, again, speaking for myself, getting to the place of, okay, why am I doing, what do I actually believe? Like, what are the reasons why I do this or that? And I started asking these questions, and the more I started asking these questions, I'm like talking to my peers, and like they're not giving me the answers that I need. This is when like apologetics happened upon my life, and it started answering some of these more philosophical, kind of deeper meaning questions, because I think at the end of the day, like every human is kind of looking for that. I wish I could remember. Ravi very succinctly summarizes like these particular things that every human is looking for.
Truth is the ultimate goal in all of our questions and our pursuits. Truth is the most valuable thing in the world. It was Winston Churchill who said in warfare, truth is the most valuable thing in the world. It's so valuable that oftentimes it's protected by a bodyguard of lies. We have to get to the truth. Number two, how do we test the truth? There are two broad theories. One is called the correspondence theory. The other is the coherence theory. When you go into a court of law and a witness is being asked to give answers, the attorney is looking for two components here. Are the answers corresponding to reality? And when all of the answers are put together, is there a coherence to these answers? So it is generally acknowledged that there's correspondence and coherence. And then 3, you test the truth by logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. Is it logically consistent? Is there an empirical way to verify this, or is just an assertion that is not even falsifiable? And ultimately, is there any experiential relevance to this? 1, truth. 2, correspondence, coherence. 3, logical consistency, empirical adequacy, experiential relevance. 4, there are 4 questions you deal with: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Now, it's very important what I've just said to you. A worldview deals with these 4 subjects. Where did I come from? What gives life meaning? How do I differentiate between good and evil? And what happens to a human being when he or she dies? Origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Now, to get to these, this is the biggest challenge. There really are 5 disciplines you have to pull together, especially in a worldview that's claiming all of the answers are there for these questions of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. God, knowledge, reality, man, morality. God deals with theology. Knowledge deals with epistemology. How do I get to this? Reality deals with metaphysics. Morality deals with ethics, and man deals with anthropology.
He very succinctly summarizes like these particular things that every human is looking for. It's like 5 particular points. You know, one of them being like, you know, morality, one of them being like destiny, like what the hell happens after all of this is over, you know, that kind of stuff. But I think, you know, when I think about religion or a person's faith as a whole, you know, you start to look at all of these different worldviews and their effect on society, you know, good or bad. You know, like I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I'm like, hey, you know, we're Christians and stuff, but like, you can't ignore the Crusades, right? Like there was a lot of people murdered, you know, spreading the message of Christianity, you know, and you know, and then you know, take that slice and then cut to today. We have like modern day Islam, you know, killing people, killing the infidels, like in the name of, to your point, their belief. And so, again, I don't want to go like, you know, right or wrong, but like I'm just looking at it as an observation, like top down, going like, this is like, you know, it's a huge disparity here, like between what one might consider right and one might consider wrong, and it's always colored by that person's worldview, you know. And this is part of the reason why like I enjoy talking to you, because you don't ever come across like, well, I'm right and you're wrong. You're just talking, and that's like my point of view too. Is like talking about this stuff because it's important, you know.
I think what you said about connecting the dots, you know, it's there, we've forgotten how to have discernment. We've forgotten how to, you know, think for ourselves, and
Right.
and when you look at things and there's components of that thing that is corroborated in another, you know, text from a different part of the, you know, the different part of the world at different times and stuff like that, then you start to build a map of, hey, what makes sense and what's just a one-off thing that's, you know, somebody's agenda, and you can just discard that. So, you know, we have to, and you know, we start to look at, like we talked about the other day, you know, you and I are describing the voice of God in a synchronicity and a coincidence, you know, from a different perspective, but we're talking about the same thing. You know, we both have the same understanding. And I think that, you know, there's a method of education, the trivium method, which is logic, grammar, and rhetoric. Grammar is collecting a varied number of sources from which to study, you know, from different sides of the aisle with different, you know, leanings. And then logic is the filtering out of that information and sifting through it and figuring out which one, where the corroborations are and where the inconsistencies are. And then rhetoric is just being able to articulate that enough that you can unpack it for somebody in a short period of time, and, you know, they can gain some sort of insider understanding from it. And, you know, it's something that the Romans, there was where they caught Mark Antony, or one of these guys caught a legionnaire like teaching this to a slave, and he marshaled him. He said, you can't. That's not for them. That's not for the unclean masses. That's for the elitists. That method of learning. And
Wow.
The American education system is a system adopted from Prussia, from World War I Europe, and it's basically teaches us what to think, not how to think.
Right. It's like indoctrination, man, for sure.
You start to look at the symbolism in that, and I just saw Hillary give a commencement speech at some university, and she's wearing this soft kind of beret. She's not wearing the flat graduation cap.
Yeah.
And you look at Ashton Kutcher, and you look at all these different guys who've spoken at different colleges, and they don't wear that flat graduation cap, because that's the Mason's mortise board, where he spreads his kind of mortar between the bricks.
Wow.
And it's an insult.
Didn't know that. That's super interesting.
Yeah, graduation is a combination of two words: gradual indoctrination. So graduation is a is the system when you've been brought up, and then they place. It's also that's the exoteric. That's the, hey, what's the purpose of the square hat? You Google that, and you're going to get it's the Mason's mortise board. But if you go into the Freemasonic temple, the floor is a checkered board floor, black and white squares on the floor, which represent the duality of light and dark.
Yeah,
and that's what this entire existence is all about. I believe that we all stem from one creator, that God was bored back in the day, and he's like, hey, it's kind of boring being by myself. I'd like to experience myself. So he created all of, everything we know, and gave you a funny kind of attitude, gave this one a serious kind of attitude, this one's shy, this one's outgoing, and we're able to see the different faces of God in our interactions with each other.
Yeah, no, we are all definitely created individually, uniquely, beautifully, wonderfully. I think part of, and I know I've said this before, but like the beauty of kind of human interaction is to your point, is like I can look at the world through your lens for even just a moment, and color it that way for that period of time. What else are you into, Sean? Man, we could just keep going off the deep end here, man. It's so tempting. But like, are you an outdoorsman? Are you?
So I've recently taken up rock climbing.
Okay,
It's,
like legit. Like I'm a flat rock, and I'm gonna climb this thing with chains,
harness, rope.
Wow.
My buddy's placing gear and leading the route, and everything like that. But I'm not quite there yet. So. Once we set the rope at the top of the mountain and we drape it over and it hits the bottom, I can climb up from there and everything.
Wow.
But it's extremely liberating. Doing research into that as anything that I find interesting. I kind of, make sure I have a very deep understanding of it. So
get me all the books. I need to do research on rock climbing.
I know you're out there hiking, which is awesome. It's part of it. Sometimes you have to hike into the base of the mountain that you're going to actually climb on. So it's with gear on and everything. So there's definitely a kind of a mountaineering aspect to it.
Right.
But West
Virginia's
got some of the best climbing out here on the East Coast, and their state motto is something in Latin like Mountaineeri Liberi, which translates to the mountaineer is free. And I was never an athletic guy, being a nerd, as you say, and where we find ourselves with our professional lives, it stems from a personal interest in technology. So I've coined a few little observations about rock climbing, and I say that it puts the out in working out, because you're getting great exercise, but you're outdoors amongst nature, taking in the sights and sounds. And it takes the work out of working out, because you can be out there all day, and you don't realize that you got such a good pump, and you're spent.
It's pretty good.
So I'm loving it. My wife's into it. My sister-in-law, we got her into it. They were close. So yeah, that's basically what we try to do on the weekends, if the weather allows, for sure.
All right. So what you want to do is you want to get yourself a GoPro, right? You want to strap that thing to your face, and just records everything. First person view, Sean rock climbing.
So I have a 360 4K camera that's on a backpack mount that actually captures my entire body while I'm on the face of the rock, you know?
Dude, come on, you need to post that. I need to see that, man. It sounds amazing.
Working on it. I'm a little hung up on the gear, as you say, you know, so I'm having a hard time going live, but I'm glad to be here, and you know, I'm looking forward to returning the favor on having you on my show.
Absolutely, man. I look forward to it, bro. It's you know what, man? It's just I don't I'm not polished. I'm not all there yet, but it's like I think, and I was reflecting on this today quietly, like a weirdo. But just like the, you know, building up the back catalog is also like the building blocks of like, okay, well, I need to get better at this. I need to refine this. I need to adjust this. Oh, that picture didn't look quite right. Maybe I need to work on that. So it's like this constant, you know, fixing and refining over time. So I think in the long run, you know, once you're like established, and like those things will work themselves out, you know, with time. But I think for me, it got to a point where like, you know, just going to work and just working and not doing anything that like kind of fills my desires for creating anything was murdering me, you know? So I'm like, I need to do something. And this is like one outlet for that, you know, that allows me to A, share my thoughts, B, use technical skills to like, you know, put together something, audio, this, that, and the other. And then like, you know, the editing of a photo or whatever, like just the creation medium as a whole. Like I'm just kind of like touching on a few different things as part of producing this. So I don't know, it gives me something to, you know, an outlet, I guess, for lack of a better word, which is cool, you know?
Definitely, man. We have the divine spark of the creator within us. And
yes,
part of our spiritual fulfillment is making something of our time here. You know, the everybody knows about karma, you know, the law of cause and effect, but few people understand the principle of dharma, which is what you're here to do. You know, our culture would teach us that the meaning of life is too obscure and our human origins are too obscure, and you know, they obfuscate or replace the truth with complexity, you know. And Terence McKenna, who's a modern, you know, philosopher, lecturer, author, said that we need to stop consuming images and we need to start creating images. And I take that one step further in with the word images, and I take that to mean anything, you know, music, spoken word, a book, you know, dance, anything that's actually pouring out, you know, what you're feeling and what's raw and what's, you know, unique and special to you, and sharing that with the world.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, man.
It's extremely important. Yeah,
definitely.
I commend you for jumping headfirst into it.
Thank you, man. I really do appreciate that. I mean, I think I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's overseas right now. If you're listening, bro, what's up? I don't want to like drop names just in case, so but you know who you are. Hope you're doing good, man. But he was just sharing, like, you know, the part where you and I might be comfortable to speak on certain things, right, where others might not necessarily be comfortable speaking openly and freely about X or Y or Z. You know, like most people might just keep, you know, the government's really screwing us over. Maybe they'll keep that comment to themselves, but you and I will be like, yo, man, you need to look into this. This, you know, and so it's just interesting, like, because I know, like, growing up, I was super shy, man. Like, I was so incredibly shy. And I think it was like my senior year, like, finally, like, being shy kind of sucks, but although I totally get it, not everybody's kind of like comfortable in their own skin. So that's, you know, hopefully something that as a society we can break out of. You know, those of us who, I guess I shouldn't say that. That sounds mean. I mean, everybody's entitled to be a certain way, but you know, I guess it's like one of these, like, I don't necessarily want people to just look to me to be a voice, but also like, hey, you know, you have your voice too. Like, what do you have to say? You know, I think ultimately that's what I'd love to encourage people to do, is just like speak your mind and speak freely, you know, but like respectfully. Like, I think that's good for people, you know, to have that dialogue, you know.
Well, silence is compliance, you know, and if we don't speak up and, express our discontent with the way things are being handled, then, those in charge assume that we're okay with it, and it's, time, we're in a really crazy time in the world. And in order for it to change, it's going to happen on a grassroots individual level. Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. Even Einstein understood that the reality that we all share is just a quantitative expression of how we all are as individuals. With my brand, my tagline is, I started to question the nature of our reality, and I found the answer in the reality of our nature. I started to have these synchronicities and really wonder what was going on, and there's got to be more than we can perceive with our five senses in the physical. And I realized that the generator of this reality that we all share is largely quantitative kind of addition of how each of us are as individuals. If enough people find certain behaviors to be acceptable, then the world, it happens to exist in a certain way. If people would kind of live morally consistent and kind of take a stand against the evil things that are going on and find their voice, then we could have peace overnight. Dude, man. I get asked a lot, I consider myself breaking away from the Orthodox religions and still extremely spiritual. And, people will ask me, well, what can we do to be spiritual, in this age? And the answer is not what we need to start doing, what we need to introduce into our lifestyle. The answer is, what can we stop doing?
Right.
What can we start saying no to? It's one of the most powerful words we learn as a child. It's usually the first word, and it's two letters. And with that word right there, we can banish evil from the land, if you will,
Right. No, it's the truth, man. I mean, it sucks, what society is willing to conform to just based on, I'm just over here, so I guess you can go do your thing over there. But that is so widespread that then it turns into that, hive mind of just we're gonna do whatever we want and nothing matters. That's the part of our collective society that kind of kills me the most, is this blind kind of marching into the abyss without really having any regard for, does it matter or not? Is it going to affect, more persons than just yourself? Like acting without love is just the worst, man. And there's just so much of that. There's so much of that being poured out into the world. Just trying to slowly, fight that, with just kind of trying to educate people, having good open conversation, having meaningful conversations. I mean, you and I are just two dudes, this giant planet of other people and voices and opinions, so it's tough, man. But I guess we got our work cut out for us.
No doubt. Well,
yeah,
I'm glad that you've created a platform, for your message is a powerful one. And, it's all about positivity. Like I said before, the dark and the light, it's this entire existence is about duality. We stem from the one, and in this world, we experience the dual. And, it's evident in male and female, hot and cold, light and dark. But when we really look at these things and we start to understand that they're not the extremes of a spectrum, that they're actually the presence of something or the absence of something. We're talking about light and dark, we're talking about the presence of photons or the absence of photons. When we're talking about hot and cold, we're talking about the kinetic energy and movement of particles or the stillness of particles. And unfortunately, the ego runs this realm. And
yes,
the people in control, going back to the pharaohs, and the pharaohs gave it to the kings, and the kings gave it to the priests, and the priests gave it to the politicians, and the politicians are handing it off to the scientists and the doctors. And the system that exists, these people understand human psychology, and they use it to direct things in a way that they can profit from and remain in power.
Right.
Just like the two extremes of all the other dualistic aspects of our reality, there's a love emotion and there's a fear emotion. And when we live in fear, it creates control. It creates this kind of tyrannical, regime type of dictatorial, oligarchical kind of regimes that we see around the world. You know, when we have love and we have self-governance and we are, you know, making decisions that we know to be right and true, then that emotion it basically breeds freedom and liberty, and it's you know, and it comes with you know, a lot of distractions. I know you and I both share. You might not go as far to say it as I will, but an addiction to video games. You know, I call myself a recovering video game addict. And the studies of the brain, you know, of video game players compared to heroin addicts and cocaine addicts, you know, from brain scans are almost identical.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Spanish word for book is libre, which is where we get our English word liberty from. You know, it's through an understanding that we can gain freedom. Our ignorance keeps us locked into a cage, you know, and the door to our cage is wide open. We just, you know, don't take away my sports and my beer and my video games. Don't you dare, you know, tell me that that I'm in a cage. You know, I love my cage. My cage is super comfy with all these material belongings, you know. So we got to break free and just, you know, become the true spiritual beings that you know, we're destined to achieve.
Man, Sean, bro, thank you so much, man. I would love with all my heart to just keep talking, man, but we got to do it for the people. So, all right, Sean, tell us where people find out more about the Mind of Sean.
Sure. You guys can check my blog out at culture.org. It's CULT-URE.org. And that's to emphasize the cult-like nature of our culture.
Yes.
That's kind of where I like to go with things. And you can follow me on social media at Who Is Sean Galt. That's Who Is SEANGALT. Anybody who's a fan of the author Ayn Rand will get that reference there. And yeah, man, I look forward to the next time we can coordinate something like this and kind of pick it up where we left off.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for your time, bro. I really do appreciate it. Guys, thanks so much for listening. Gosh, I hate to end it, Sean. I really do. But got to do it for the people and the kids.
Absolutely, man.
All right, man. Well, you have a good one. Take care. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
You too.